talking about growth and like without having any kind of profitability, because that is a sure short way of limiting yourself. Because like you'll also have to understand that if round the year if you keep on just doing 30% off, 40% off, 50% off, then you are also building a perception about your brand being a heavily discounted brand only. The overrated pieces, people think that it's a magic wand और मतलब मैं आराम से बैठ जाऊंगा, सारा का सारा काम हो जाएगा. It has not reached the state yet. When you look at average order value online and you look at average order value offline, the offline average order value is 3 times higher. To grow in marketing as a career, and then if you want to transition into leadership positions of marketing, it will have to be a mix of both.
Hey there, welcome to Marketing Mavericks with IndieFolio. Today we have Susovan Ray, who is the General Manager of Marketing at Total Environment Building Systems. Susovan started as an engineer, he did the electrical engineering, and then it inspired him to do many things. He's done his fair bit of consulting, strategy, before moving into marketing roles. So we unpack a lot of advice over specialization versus variety. We unpack the role of AI a lot and really understand how you can become a leader. Thanks a lot for your time and welcome to the podcast, Susovan.
Hey Kavan, thank you. Thanks for inviting me. It's a pleasure to join this conversation today.
I think I want to first jump into your background, right? I'm very excited to talk to you because I often see the people who tune into our conversation have done, engineering, and they're sometimes curious, what's next. And if I know right, when you were in BITS, I read somewhere that was actually the place, an engineering school, which inspired you to maybe pursue some creative role, some marketing role. So could you start right there? What was the decision to kind of become an engineer, and how did you really transition to the role you currently have? When did the marketing bug catch your brain?
Yeah, sure. So why engineering, right? Especially in India, with like let's say majority of the people, they like always think of either two streams. So I happen to come from that particular age slash generation.
Mhm.
So both of my parents were doctors, so they always wanted me to become a doctor. But I had a very different plan, right? Because right in class 8 or ninth, I realized that this is not made for me. So like biology and chemistry were the two subjects that I used to hate the most. And I had acquired a taste for maths and physics, right? So that's why, like, if I were to pick and choose between these two, then obviously engineering was a clear choice. And yeah, of course, like I was not as much into commerce or anything of that sort, so that's why engineering. So like I used to like some of the subjects, but as a student, I was very picky about some of the things that I like. Some of the courses that I like, I really go deep into those, but some of the other courses that I don't like, I try to like acquire a taste for that. But like after a certain point of time, I just like leave it, right? I mean, if that's not for me, like I have this hunch that okay, this is not meant for me, and like I stay away from that. And that's why like I stayed away from biology. But that's a different story. That in bits, like we also had general biology for 2 semesters, and I was like, oh my goodness, like something that I wanted to stay away from, like that also like pulled me into that. But yeah, like so that's how engineering happened, right? I had an inclination towards maths and physics, and that is something that I continued. Regarding the pursuit for creative fields, of course, like when it started off as an interest towards advertising, because like we all grew up listening to those 90s jingles. Like there were Pidilite, Fevicol, like so many ads, right? I was like very very fascinated with those ads, to be honest. And like later on, I was also interested into, like, there was always a cultural nuance to like my overall journey. So I was good at singing. I used to participate in a lot of these inter-school inter-district competitions. And later on, that singing interest, that like eventually like grew more towards, like, let's say, getting into dramatics. So my
Mhm.
interest towards dramatics went up, and like interest towards singing went down. And that's when I tried and experimented with all genres of dramatics, right? Like I was into theater, like let's say probably doing a stage play, street play, mime, all of these kind of things. And then we started doing a lot of ad spoofs. So that's when I really like got that kick, right? Okay, man, like this is like really interesting. So how can we like give our tune to something of this sort? So I clearly remember back in those days during World Cups, there were a lot of ads which said, okay, like how did Dilsan get his Dil scoop, or like how did Yuvraj get his pull shot, or like how did some of the other players got their hook shot. So we tried to create our own renditions and all. So that's how this entire piece started, wherein like and back in those times I thought advertising is marketing. Well, like later on I realized that it's not. it's just a smaller subset of marketing. But like now when I connect the dots back, I think things fell in place for me. So I was always inclined towards this creative side of things. It's not that I hated like my engineering piece. In fact, I was interested in embedded systems.
Hmm.
And to be honest, like if I were given a choice, I would have done a master's in embedded systems. But for that, I would have to go to the US, right? And then like probably spend a good number of years in the US. I wanted to stay closer to my parents. So I was very clear right from the beginning that I had to stay in India. So staying in India, doing a master's in tech, I would have made a career in, like, let's say probably becoming a professor in some of those colleges and all. But I wanted to do a lot more, right? I wanted to do advanced applications and all. So I realized this is not something which is happening with, like, let's say all of the constraints that I had. So
Hmm.
I was very clear that okay, India mein rehna hai, masters bhi karna hai, right? Because like both of my parents being doctors, they would never be happy with like me just doing a graduation. So it was very clear. Staying in India, doing a master's, tech does not seem like an option. So after that, it's like, let's say probably option elimination, and then you realize that okay, this is something which seems to be the natural fit or flow, and that's how like market MBA happened. And MBA in marketing because of like there's some kind of interest, and I always I was not quite fascinated by finance or operations. I felt operations was somewhat boring for me. Finance is like, let's say, too much of Excel sheets. It did not give me to, like, let's say play around with that creativity, or like probably getting into understanding those nuances of, like, let's say, general life, day-to-day life. How do I bring to like see all of those observations and put those into practice. So that's why post engineering MBA and MBA in marketing specifically.
Superb. I think you mentioned a very interesting point, which is you initially thought marketing is advertising. And often young people make that mistake. So the question I want to ask you is, now that you know the entire gamut of things, right? That marketing includes many P's, not just, working with celebrities and not just making ads, not just doing performance, but so much more deeper. Do you think marketing is more for the creative side of your brain, or is it more for the analytical side for the brain? If I'm somebody who's trying to understand if marketing is for me, like who should I be is the real question.
Yeah, so I think, see, we'll have to be very, very clear about like what are our strengths, right? And then accordingly see like whether marketing is for me or not, right? Because marketing as such is a, like, these days it has been broken down into multiple substreams, right? Marketing has got creative fields, and then it has also got analytical fields. But if you look at the basic Philip Cottrell's definition of marketing, it's like, let's say, it encompasses everything, right? So like 4 P's, then that has transitioned to become 7 P's, or whatever people may wish to call it. But it starts from consumer, right? Like starting from like understanding who your consumer is, right? And then like creating, communicating and delivering value, right? I mean, that's what is Philip Kotler's definition of marketing. So it has got certain sub segments that will appeal to the creative set of people, and it has got some of the other subs, and then it has got some other substreams that will appeal to analytical bent of people. But I think if you want to grow in marketing as a career, and then if you want to transition into leadership positions of marketing, it will have to be a mix of both. I'm not saying it has to be a 50-50 sort of a thing, but definitely a 70-30 is a desirable thing, a 70-30 or a 60-40, where you understand both the nuances. You understand creatives and you understand numbers as well. Otherwise what will happen is, you might say, oh, I'm a graphic designer, or let's say I'm a script writer, I don't have to get into those kind of pieces. Then you better choose fields which are, like, let's say, more inclined towards those kind of super specializations. But especially in marketing, if you're like, let's say, coming up with a concept, right, it starts from, okay, what is the insight from consumer behavior,
Hmm.
which then goes into the brief, which is called the marketing brief, where we say, okay, this is what, so this is where the business currently stands, this is where the business wants to go, right? Like, let's say your business currently is at X business, you want to grow your revenue from X to 3X, right? And then you get into like further breaking that down into, okay, so if this is the business objective, this is where my marketing currently stands. I am currently at X market share, I want to grow from X to Y market share. And like, what is the reason to believe for me to grow from X to Y market share, right? And that's where we break it down further into saying, okay, you know what, my awareness in the market is like really good, but my consideration currently is lacking. Or probably if I break down my portfolio and then seeing, okay, my high end portfolio looks weaker right now, my entry level portfolio is good, but then that is probably being driven by pricing related offers or communications. So how do I build better brand consideration, right? So that's a marketing side of piece, where we are getting into figuring out, okay, this is what we need to do. And
Hmm.
then that further zooms in into communications brief, which is where we get into saying, okay, ठीक है, consideration is low, so we'll have to improve consideration. So what are some of the routes that we can do, that we can take to enhance consideration? So what are some of our strengths? What is competition doing? What is it that consumers find it valuable? And then eventually arrive at some of those nuances, saying, "Acha, theek hai, this seems to be a sweet spot for us." So all of these things go into the marketing brief that then goes out to the agency, right? Who then start thinking about, okay, so if this is what we are set to achieve, this is what is the consumer, this is what a TG looks like. So accordingly, they will come back with a few of the communication routes, which then gets discussed with the marketing team at the client side, and then they like arrive at a, like, let's say probably a communication route or a master creative slash communication route. And then you break it down into, okay, like how does this live and breathe on digital as a channel? How does this live and breathe on like some of the other like, let's say outdoors or hoardings? And then how do we take this into, like, let's say some of the other channels, like, let's say probably what could be its implication in radio, what could be its implication in like, let's say print, or so on and so forth, right? So if you look at this entire gamut of P's, it's not just creative, right? Yeah, of course there is a lot of creativity involved into this, but it's like a lot of analytical rigor as well, where you break down into a whole lot of things and then understand, okay, where exactly is the business, where is the industry, what are some of the closest competition doing, how exactly are we thinking about growing our volumes, and all of those kind of things. So everything is like eventually connected back to business. So for that kind of a mindset, if you're just looking at being interested in just creative itself, I think you're going to struggle, right? And at the same time, if you're interested only in numbers, right, and you shut off the moment you are getting into creative, even then you'll struggle. Because then the moment something comes like, okay, like, can you please evaluate this creative, and then you'll say, oh, but ye to mera kaam nahi hai, ye to creative team ka kaam hai, right? So which means that like you are limiting yourself, and then like you'll not be meant for those kind of conversations wherein people are going deeper and then they are thinking on those nuances. So I think
Yeah.
I mean, for me, a great mix could still be 60-40, because I understand that some people will always have an inclination, slightly more inclination towards one. But the one where you are less inclined towards that, like if you can peg it to at least 40, if not 40, 30, that will hold you good for leadership positions in marketing.
A lot of times people who tune into this podcast are also owners of young companies, right? Founders of young companies. And for them, answering what's my brand equity is like impossible. So could you also tell a little bit about that? Sorry to kind of interrupt the whole question, but
Yeah,
let's say
sure.
I'm a startup. I'm
Yeah,
2 3 years into it. There's a huge amount of competition.
yeah,
How do I really understand my brand equity?
sure. So there are multiple ways of doing it, right? Some of the typical CPG companies, they have got very structured ways of doing it. So they would usually have tie-ups with some of these research firms, and what they do is they conduct quarterly researches, which go into probably speaking to their target customers, and then it's a set of questionnaire where they try and gauge, okay, like they try and gauge your perception about a brand A versus your perception about some of the other brands, right? So there would be questions which would be typically, uh, of course, I mean, they would not get to know like which brand are you doing this research for, but then there would be questions around like their typical category consumption. So let's say if you're talking about let's say footwear, so then they would start asking, okay, like what sort of footwear do you own? Is it like more performance heavy, or is it more like, let's say, styling heavy, right? And then you get into like, let's say, decoupling like further questions about each of those ones. And then you get in, okay, like what are some of the brands that you usually prefer when you go there, and like why do you prefer some of these brands? And then would you be willing to pay a premium? So like, let's say if this same product was being offered by some other brand, would you be willing to pay a premium for that, right? And that's when you get to know, if people are saying, okay, like if it is coming in from brand A, I would not mind paying a premium, versus if it's coming from brand B, I would definitely not pay a premium. So there that there is some bit of a friction in the minds of consumers
Interesting.
when it comes to understanding that. So that is one way of doing it.
Got it.
The other way is, um, some firms also have something called as so they have quantified, so they would have some kind of a brand health score or brand power score, where they try and break down into probably there are multiple frameworks of doing it. So like, without getting into like really really depth, what I could do is probably just give you some of the nuances. So like some of the brands, what they do is they also get into understanding, okay, like do people feel that this brand is differentiated enough, right?
Mhm.
Are they doing something which is innovative, which is fresh, which is not there in the market, nobody else is talking about it? So that is one. Second
Mhm.
is this brand top of mind? Do I see this brand enough, right?
Mhm.
And when I talk about see this brand enough, it's not just your media visibility, it is also about your distribution visibility. You might be doing a fabulous job in terms of your media visibility, but if you are not there everywhere, so
Mhm.
somewhere like you will lose out on those kind of nuances as well, right? So like when you look at all of these kind of pieces, and then there are some models which they bake in the back end, and then they come back with saying, okay, this is where your brand power score currently sits on, right? Like, let's say, how much would people consider you versus your other competition, and what is the kind of premium that they're willing to pay for the same product coming in from your brand versus the other one.
Right.
So that's what gives brands a good sense of like their standing in the market. So let's say if you're in a business where you're generating a revenue of $100, right? And let's say your average order value is um, okay, like, forget about revenue, so your average order value is $100,
Mm.
right? And for you to generate a ROAS, which is return on ad spend. So I'm not getting into profit on ad spend right now, I'm just looking at like how much of a revenue have you generated from your ad spend. So if I'm saying 4x ROAS, I will have to keep my spends within 25 for me to hit a 4x ROAS on a 100 का average order value, right?
Correct.
तो वो 25 रुपीज जनरेट करने के लिए, इफ आई लुक एट माई सम ऑफ द चैनल्स, सो लेट्स से गूगल, सो गूगल ऑपरेट्स ऑन सीपीसी. लेट्स से इफ गूगल का सीपीसी इज 5 रुपीज फॉर ease of calculation, so every click I spend about 5 rupees, and I have to keep my acquisition cost within 25. So which means that for every 5 clicks I'll have to generate a conversion,
Yeah.
right? So which means that my CVR has to be 20%.
Yeah.
If I consider key all of those 5 clicks will land into my website. Many a times in digital marketing parlance, it does not happen. Many of them are accidental clicks. So if you get 100 clicks on the console side, on the on your web analytics side, you will not see 100. There will
Mm.
be some drop of 20-30% there, right? तो
Mhm.
ये पांच में से अगर 20% ड्रॉप हो गया, तो आई एम एनी विच वेज लाइक हैविंग ओनली 4 clicks, and then I'll have to generate one conversion from those 4 clicks, which means 25% CVR.
Mhm.
Now look at what CVR are you currently at, right? And then break it down saying, acha theek hai, does this seem realistic? Because see, there are two nuances here. One is, agar brand equity mein there is no difference, right? So which means that your brand is strong enough. Then you will have to look into your value prop. There could be some problem with your value prop as well. Okay, people are willing to buy you, but like not at this price. So then do you think of adding some additional offers there? Or you think that, okay, value proposition, maybe there's no problem, there is something else. Then you will have to try in to see, okay, like, is my communication right? Am I, like, let's say, not being fresh enough, or those kind of nuances, right? So based on that, you figure out whether that is a realistic target to have or not, right? And then you can also do some bit of competition scan to figure out, okay, if I am at this ROAS, what are my close competition operating at? See,
Mm.
because many times if you know that everybody is struggling at 1x or 1.5x, and then you have set a target of 4x, then it will not happen through incremental thinking. You will have to have something like really, really disruptive.
Yeah.
So for Puma case, like, how we achieved this is, see, there was very interesting insight that was happening with us, which again which again came to the picture because, like, we actually had a very, very larger outlook at the business, right?
Mhm.
What we realized was, when you look at average order value online and you look at average order value offline, the offline average order value was 3 times higher than the average order value online,
Mhm. Mhm.
right? So if people were paying 100 rupees every order online, offline people were paying 400.
Mm.
So what we understood was, okay, the experience that we were delivering in the offline stores
Mm.
was far better as compared to the online, right? And then there are some limitations of digital platforms as well. So the touch and feel and all of those kind of things, you will never be able to get that, right? So whenever we used to come up with any of our high-end portfolios, like, let's say, if my average order value on online platforms is 1,000 or 1,500 bucks, and my offline average order value is 5,000 bucks, and let's say I'm launching a campaign which is 10,000 rupee ka footwear, the chances for me to sell that footwear offline is much better as compared to online, right?
Mm.
And then what we also realized is, a lot of people, they used to research about the product online, but they did not buy the product online. They used to go offline and then pick it up from there, right? So then we got into thinking as to, okay, how do I measure this journey, right?
Yeah.
Online to offline. There's a lot of discover online, purchase offline things were happening. And then we got in touch with, these digital platforms like Meta as well as Google. And then we told them that, boss, we are facing this problem. We want to find a solve. And then they said, okay, like, we already have some products in our portfolio which can help you connect your online to offline journey. So
Fantastic.
then when we got into that particular nuance and then connected our offline. So earlier what we were seeing is online page, chalo theek hai, agar like by spending 100 we were getting 150 or 200 rupee revenue.
Mm.
We were completely blind on the offline piece. But
Correct.
people who had clicked on our ads, they had come to the website. They did not pick it up from website, but then they went to the nearby store and picked it up. When we
Correct.
added that chunk of revenue which is coming in from this, so that like really pumped it up for us. So when
Fantastic.
you look at your overall ROAS, that overall ROAS, like it was like let's say like 5 to 6x. So that pumped it up to 5x or 6x. And then like within online space, we worked on conversion rate optimization. We also worked on ensuring that your inventory is available. Like all of your regular sizes are available. Many a times your conversion rate drops because people like a product, but the
Mm-hmm.
sizing is not available.
Mm-hmm.
I
Understood.
paid for that click, but that conversion never happened, and
Right.
did not happen because of non-availability of stock. So there was nothing wrong with the campaign per se. There was wrong with like let's say like what kind of assortment of merchandise do I have on my website.
Correct.
So
Makes
now
sense.
you connect the dots, right? Like if you just focus on your campaign and you focus on your creative, you say no, but my creative has done a fabulous job. My CTR is great, and then the buck stops there. But
Mm-hmm.
for you to be able to showcase this entire piece and then to own this entire journey, you will have to then get into all of these nuances, right?
Makes sense.
Understanding online क्या चल रहा है, offline क्या चल रहा है, मेरा CVR कैसे improve होगा, मेरा assortment, merchandise, मेरे website पे क्या है, right? And then accordingly, and then we always used to plan campaigns where like we were like adequately stocked. So if my so let's say my creative is ready, my media plan is ready, my budgets are also there, but inventory is thin. We never run campaigns then.
Mm.
So we waited it out for the inventory to be well stocked up across all of our retail stores, so that like when I launch a campaign, I know that like if even if that person is discovering online but buying offline, I should have product in the offline stores for me to be able to generate this kind of a ROAS.
Right.
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 So a lot of things went from those kind of nuances which helped us get into these. And then when it comes to the other e-commerce platforms, so the likes of Mintra, Jabong, back then Jabong used to be a craze, right? It doesn't exist anymore. So Amazon, they were also a partner. So over here we did a good mix of brand visibility slash offer led communication, because like you'll also have to understand that if round the year if you keep on just doing 30% off, 40% off, 50% off, then you are also building a perception about your brand being a heavily discounted brand online, right?
Right.
So when you're looking at having a healthy balance of equity versus like let's say the other piece which is revenue, you will also have to tread this path very very carefully as to how many number of activations are you doing which is going more around offer versus like how many number of activations which are going more from a brand slash engagement slash premium side, right? So we had a lot of these collaborations where we were saying okay, like we'll take you to like we'll fly people to Abu Dhabi because Puma used to have a motorsport collection. Abu Dhabi had a F1 track, so like all of the motorsport enthusiasts, so that was more from a brand elevation
Right.
standpoint. So those kind of nuances. So you'll have to plan your mixes well enough, and
Mm.
then be very very closely glued in into the numbers. Like what exactly are your numbers looking like right now? And another thing that really helped us is like having tentpole visibility during their big sale events,
Mm.
right? Like let's say your end of season sale, two of the big sale events. There's no way you can afford to miss those because just think about it. Like probably your 30% of your business that you do in the full year, for some brands, their 25 to 30% of their business can happen during these end of season sale, which is like
Yeah.
let's say probably 5 day in the first half, 5 day in the second half.
Fantastic.
10 days
30%.
if
Huh?
you're making
Wow.
this kind of business. Yeah, of course it will depend from category to category and all, but I have seen some of the brands like who have generated that kind of revenue coming in. So that is like let's say unmissable kind of a thing, the kind of traffic that used to come. Of course these days I don't know about the mix anymore, but yeah, of course, like that was the kind of traffic and revenue potential that you have. So you cannot afford to miss out on that piece at all, right? So having your visibility and at the same time being adequately stocked, plus also like keeping your eyes open to also figure out that there could be some of the offline pieces also happening. And yeah, of course, having the fine balance between your equity elevating campaigns versus like let's say your offer led communication.
Yeah.
um, I think yeah, it's a mix of everything together, and then yeah, consistent execution is very important. I mean, day in, every single day you'll have to keep doing that, and then I think like rest of the things will fall in place.
I feel there is so much pressure on young marketers today because if I'm doing engineering, people are saying engineering is not the same anymore, coding is not the same anymore, AI is here. If I'm doing design or creative, they're like, AI is here, whatever your work is going to look very different. If I'm a marketeer, you just said what we always thought in terms of performance, digital targeting, now it's something else completely. So the playbooks are changing every day. And if I'm a young marketeer, I'm confused. So on that front, could you tell me one underrated thing about AI, which I should double down on, and one overrated thing about AI, which you feel people are over indexing on too much?
I think underrated thing. See, AI will definitely enable you to push boundaries of your thinking, right? Because see, you think of any work stream within marketing, it is touching all of those work streams, right? Like even if we break it down in terms of, like, let's say sequencing,
Mm-hmm.
you would see like it is there, like it can help you do better research, it
Mm-hmm.
can help you generate better insights, it can help you even write marketing briefs, right? Of course, like you will have to figure out, okay, like what is it that AI has written, and then accordingly add your flavor to it so that like you are keeping it tight enough, right? Because many times AI hallucinates as well.
Yeah.
So you need to have all of those nuances in place, but like otherwise every aspect, or like every aspect of marketing workstream is something that AI is already touching upon. So I think the underrated skill, I would say, I mean, it really helps you structure your thinking. Many times, marketers, because of
Sure.
that creative, or like that creative halo effect, or whatever it is, like whatever you wish to call it, we do not think so much in structures, like it's like quite unstructured. But this has been my personal experience of using AI, like the way it breaks down things and then accordingly gives the sequential steps of things and all. It just like helps me think in structures, right?
Yeah.
Of course, like I have all of those things, but I would have thought of those in zigzag patterns. It helps me put those into a proper structure. So I think that is a very underrated thing. I do not see a lot of people talking
That's
about
Yeah.
that particular aspect, right? Which is what I would say as an
Fair.
underrated thing
Fair.
for AI. Overrated, I think, of course, everybody uses it for copy. Like, okay, can you give me a copy? Can you give me, or like, can you help me draft better? I was just playing around with, summarizing use cases, and what I realized is maybe it's still not there, right? Because many times I have had my frustration moments with AI, because like I stopped coding after engineering, like, and even during engineering as well, because I have done electrical engineering, so not as much of the coding that the software guys do. We used to have very different kind of coding into
Yeah.
hexadecimal codes, VHDL, and all of those kind of nuances. Plus school के time में थोड़ा बहुत किया था C++ and all, right? But like now things have moved on.
Yeah.
So I tried a lot of vibe coding with AI because I wanted to build some of the use cases myself, right? Because we wanted to reduce the dependence on our IT teams. Uh, Thankfully enough, there were so many automation use cases that I was able to drive without any coding experience. It was just through LLM rigor, right? Natural language rigor and all. And many times I keep getting frustrated, and I was almost like, okay, what are you doing, you dumb machine? You're supposed to help me do this, and like you're supposed to reduce my time. But like the kind of time it took for me to just like engage in that conversation and then keep telling, because it'll keep going wayward, right? So you will have to peg it down into, okay, we are getting off track, please come back onto the track and all. And then there are so many tools available in the market, and then like all of those tools capabilities also vary largely. So if you try, like, let's say tool A for something versus tool B for something, you will see, like, let's say very very varied output. And then
Mhm.
you know that, okay, some tool is better for one particular use case, some other tools would be better for some other use cases and all. So I think the overrated pieces, people think that it's a magic wand, or मतलब मैं आराम से बैठ जाऊंगा, सारा का सारा काम हो जाएगा. It has not reached that state yet, and like many times you'll also have your frustrating experiences with AI. But I
Mhm.
still feel it's still a very good tool to use, because honestly speaking, I can't think of hiring somebody who does not know anything, and like training that person, and like eventually get to this kind of an output.
Correct.
So I think productivity has definitely increased, but you will have to play that anchor role to like pull it back to like being on track, because it can get off track very soon. And yeah, sky is the limit, because like it knows everything, right? So it'll start pulling in things from all of these kind of pieces. So prompt engineering is a very essential skill, and I think everybody should know that.
Understood. Understood. Um, Thank you for, I think, kind of unpacking many things and giving such solid examples. It's been an awesome time having you. We're at time, so I'd love to kind of, conclude this by asking you for a parting thought. You've given obviously a lot of advice over the last an hour. But if I'm a young marketer today and I want to become a marketing leader, What's your advice to me? Like, what are the things I should focus on to become a leader one day?
Sure. I think first things first is think big. Think like always think about the larger picture, right? Do not think in silos, because that is a sure short way of limiting yourself. Many times people will say, okay, I'm a marketer. A lot of people don't even think in that sense anymore. Like, just to give a very clear cut example, these days within marketing also, people are saying brand marketing, performance marketing. So somebody who's into performance marketing, he just thinks performance. Okay, I am like, so you are kind of limiting your playground, right?
Mm,
So do not think in those terms. Always think from a very large picture, right? So even you're thinking marketing, think consumer. So if you're thinking about consumer, and then if you're thinking about, okay, adding value to his life, his or her life, and then think about, okay, like that journey, right? So your decision journey, the consumer decision journey, many a times, that starts long before that person is thinking about making a purchase,
yeah.
right? Then you'll be able to think end to end, right? So like having this very very um, wider view will definitely help you go really really far, right? So instead of thinking in silos, always think wider, think larger.
Hmm.
So one is of course thinking in terms of the consumer life and consumer decision journey. Second is like be as glued into business fundamentals as possible, राइट, बिकॉज मेनी टाइम्स इफ यू से कि नहीं बॉस मुझे कैंपेन चलाना है, इसके लिए मुझे 5x बजट की ज़रूरत है, एंड देन यू वुड सी कि योर ग्रॉस मार्जिन्स आर डिपिंग, right? So like eventually business will have to generate enough cash for it to be able to like give you, those kind of nuances. Or otherwise, unless until they have got that kind of a growth trajectory wherein they know कि अच्छा अगले 2-3 साल I'm not going to ask you any questions, we need growth at any cost. But I think we are far away from that phase where like people are only talking about growth and like without having any kind of profitability.
Hmm.
So understanding business fundamentals, धंधा कैसे हो रहा है, like how are we making money, and then accordingly figuring out कि अच्छा if this is the surplus that we are generating, marketing का investment का budget उसी से ही आने वाला है,
Hmm.
right? So it's not going to come from like anywhere else. So
Hmm.
having those kind of understanding also puts you in good stead, because now you also start appreciating that why are some calls being taken where they are slashing the marketing budgets or like increasing the marketing budgets. So you're able to better relate to those kind of pieces as well. So there's big thinking, and then the second thing is like I said, like having very very close glue in into businesses. These two things, and then the third thing is of course it's very important to enjoy what you're doing, right? Because life will throw surprises at you.
Hmm.
It's not like, like whatever you have planned on paper, it will happen the same way. It has not happened for me. Even my career also has gone through a lot of zigzags. A lot of things the way I had planned, it had not gone that way. But one thing that I can be very sure of is like I have always loved my work, right? So whatever I'm doing, I put my heart and soul into it. I go 200% into it, right? So whatever you're putting on your CV, just ensure that you can hold on to that conversation even if the interviewer goes 4 to 5 levels deeper.
Yeah.
If you're not able to hold on to that conversation, then you know that you do not know what you have done well enough.
Yeah.
So if you're able to do those things, I think, well, yeah, of course, there will be some things which will be in your control. There will be some things which will not be in your control. So don't worry as much about things that are not in your control, but work really hard and then try to improve the aspects that are in your control. So only when you have that internal locus of control, you will take a lot more responsibility. And I think, yeah, rest, there is always something above and beyond us. So leave the rest to the Almighty, right? Like उनको भी तो कुछ करने दो, सब कुछ अगर हम ही करेंगे तो वो क्या करेंगे, राइट? सो लाइक लेट अस डू आवर पार्ट वेल, एंड देन या लेट्स होप ऑन द पावर ऑफ यूनिवर्स टू मेक थिंग्स फॉल इन प्लेस.
100%. Thank you so much. I think a fantastic conclusion to our conversation. I hope you had a good time, Sohan.
Yeah, absolutely. It was a lovely conversation. It was my pleasure indeed. And in fact, like when he had reached out saying that we wanted to have this conversation, I thought, yeah, like why not? And it always helps to give people the kind of perspective. And I would be glad if someone is benefited from the journey, or like let's say the thought process behind my journey. So yeah, always looking forward to such kind of conversations.
Awesome, awesome. Has been a great experience for me to also host you. And so thank you so much for everybody who's stuck along till the end. Thank you for tuning in. And if you'd like to hear another marketing leader, please subscribe to our channels and a new episode will come out very soon.